Greetings to you all. Thank you for following my lessons and following my presentations. Uh, in our previous lesson, we looked at following instructions. We are going to look at volumetric analysis, and there are some important concepts that we are going to handle under this. First, we shall look at how to record the results. We shall also look at how to manipulate the results or deal with the results. We shall also look at how to use the results to attempt moral concept calculations. Let us begin with the first part, how to record results. We are going to begin with the pipette results. Last time we looked at recording pipette results by looking at the bulb. We said we look at the bulb and we note the value written there. For this case, the value which is written there is 25. So therefore, the pipette volume here is 25. But if we are to record this volume for examination purposes, we shall not write just 25. We shall write 25.0. In other words, pipette volumes must be recorded with one decimal place. So therefore, we are supposed to write 25.0. However, there are other pipettes which are even more than 25. Some are below 25, like 20 and 10. But whichever burette given to you, the technique is one. When you're recording its volume, you should write it with one decimal place. If it is 20, we shall write 20.0. If it is 10, we shall write 10.0. Let us look at the table of results. Table of results. This table is a table of results for the burette. It is for the burette readings. It has features. The first feature is showing us the number of experiments, and the number of experiments in this case means the number of titrations we are going to perform. If you are going to perform 4 titrations, then you have performed 4 experiments. It has final burette reading. The final burette reading is the one we get after we have done the titration. The initial burette reading, this is the one which we start with. I taught you how to set the initial burette volume. So that initial volume, I taught you how to set it. So therefore, after setting that initial volume, it is now going to act as your initial burette reading. You'll have to record it in that table. On that table also, we have a provision for the volume of solution used. That volume of the solution can be specified. You can call it BA1, you can call it BA2. But for us, let us call it volume of solution. This volume of solution is got by subtracting the initial volume from the final volume of the solution. So we enter it in a table. So we shall enter our results in a table which looks like this. I've already talked about the number of experiments, and I have said the number of experiments refers to the number of titrations or the number of titrations you're going to perform. In this case, we have the rough, the first one, the second one, and the third one. So therefore, there are 4 experiments you're going to perform in this practical. So you will have to perform 4 titrations. Final burette reading, we have seen it. We have seen initial volume of solution used, but there's one thing we have not looked at, the rough. When you're starting an experiment, we always start with the rough experiment. This rough experiment, as you see the word itself, rough, it means this one is not an accurate value. Though some students are very smart and they can carry it very carefully and get an accurate volume. So you may not consider your rough experiment as accurate. So therefore, you may not rely on it when you're carrying out calculations. So we shall rely more on these 1, 2, and 3 experiments. But the rough one, it just gives us a rough idea of where the end point is. Sometimes it can even be above the end point. So if you consider it, you'll be considering a wrong result. But on performing the first experiment after the rough, here you're going to be very careful because you would have known where the end point is. So therefore, the following experiments after the rough are considered to be accurate. So uh, let us now look at the precautions we need when we are entering the results of the burette. Of course, we have said that table is a table which contains results from the burette. The first precaution here, uh, we should make sure we enter our results immediately after obtaining the end point. Don't waste any minute. Immediately finish your titration. Make sure you record that value as your final burette reading. You enter it there. Well, we do it immediately just to avoid forgetting or entering wrong results. So you do it immediately. Precaution number 2, we need to learn how to read results on the burette. Results on the burette uh, are only read by looking at the lower meniscus. You look at the lower meniscus. You see that illustration with a portion of the burette. There is an eye trying to focus at a certain point. So that point is the one whose results we record or we take. So we shall be entering that result where the meniscus is sitting or lying. You can see the dots of those red dots pointing to the eye. So your eye is supposed to be fixed at that position so that you see that burette reading. So immediately you get it, you go and record as we have seen before. Another precaution, we should also enter our results with 2 decimal places. For example, we have 20.10, we have 30.50, we have 30.00, and the others. So when you look at those results, they are having 2 decimal places. But when you look at these ones, like 20.1, 30.0, 30.5, 30.0, those results there, they have only 1 decimal place. So therefore, such results are not accepted. So if we are to record our results, they should be having 2 decimal places. Okay. Another thing is how to consider the consistent, or how to identify the consistent results. Consistent results here are identified by looking at the differences. So our differences as students, the differences in the values we get should not go beyond 0.2 for O levels. While for A level students, the difference should not go beyond 0.1. So the degree of error here, if for O levelers, should be at least it should not be beyond 0.1. While for those in O level, the degree of error should not go beyond 0.2. So that's how we identify the consistent results. So which means these results must be close to each other. They should be close to each other. Okay. Now let us look at the steps we take when we are recording correct results. Remember, in my previous lessons, I've been teaching you how to set the initial value or initial burette volume. So I've taught you how to do it. So assuming we have set our initial burette volume and it is 0.00. So we shall go in our table, as we are going to see. You enter that result where there is initial volume. Where there is the initial volume, you record 0.00. So 0.00 is our initial volume. Don't write 0.0. You must write that value with 2 decimal places, as we have seen before. Now, after entering our initial burette volume, we are now set to start our titration. In our titration, I think you know what you're supposed to do. You have already pipetted, you have put an indicator in your conical flask, you have put it under the burette. Now you are carrying out the titration. You are carrying out the experiment. Now, assuming you have titrated and you have got 24.5 on your burette, when you are to write that value correctly, you are supposed to write it with 2 decimal places, as we have seen earlier. So therefore, we shall be writing 24.50. And this value is going to be our final burette reading. Because we have carried out our practical, we have carried out the titration, the color of the indicator has changed, we have stopped the closed the tap, and we have read our value as 24.50. So you go in your table, record that value as your final burette reading. The table is here. So your final burette reading in this case, it is 24.50. Okay, so you have done that. Now this is an activity. We are going to do an activity. We are going to use that table, the one I've shown you, to enter those results there and also come up with the volume of solution used. Use that table, fill in the final burette reading, fill in the initial burette reading, and get the volume of solution used, or volume of BA2 used. I taught you how to get this. I said you get the final burette reading and subtract it. Sorry, I beg your pardon. You get the initial burette reading and subtract it from the final burette reading. What you get is your volume of the solution used. So you're going to help me fill that table. I'm going to give you some few seconds to help me fill that. Okay, I think that time is enough. Let me produce mine. You've produced yours. Now my table is going to look like this. Final burette reading, it was 24.50. The initial was 0.00 cubic centimeters. And then when we subtract the initial volume from the final volume, we shall get 24.50 as our volume of solution used. Now we have covered the rough experiment. We want now to move on to the next experiment. Before you move on to the next experiment, the first thing we are going to do is to pour away the solutions in the conical flask, pour them away and wash the conical flask so that it is clean. After doing that, you repeat the experiment. Of course, you know what we do. First, begin with the pipetting, add an indicator, then put your contents under a burette. Now, after doing that, before you start off with another titration, you need to record the initial titer value. In this case, the initial titer value is the value where we stopped in the previous experiment. In our previous experiment, we have stopped on 25.5. So therefore, that is our initial titer value. Therefore, the initial titer value can also be the final titer value of the previous experiment. So the titer value of the previous experiment is 24.50. So that is going to work as our initial value or initial volume. You will come to your table here. Remember, we have finished the rough. Now we are on experiment number 1. So our initial burette value is 24.50 because that is where we ended in our previous experiment. Okay. After entering that value there, now we are set to titrate and perform another experiment. So now we are going to carry out another titration. We are going to titrate and we get the end result or the final burette reading. Assuming we get our final burette reading as 49.00, we shall go in our final burette reading row and we enter that value there. Our initial burette reading has been 24.50. Our final, we have got 49.00. So we shall enter our results there. Then after we subtract the initial volume from the final volume, then we get volume of the solution used, or volume of BA1 or BA2 used. Okay. So now, here we are. We have got that value. When you look at that value critically, that value is very big, 49.00. It's big. Remember, our titer volume is around 24 point something. According to the rough one, our rough result has given us 24 point something. So which means we expect to get the maximum volume at least to be 24 point something there. But when you look at 49, it means we are now remaining with 11.00 cubic centimeters in our burette. So which means we are remaining with too little solution. It cannot help us to carry on another titration. So what do? We shall have to refill our burette. Get your beaker, get a funnel, pour and refill your burette into you add and fill more solution into the burette. You can go ahead and set the initial burette reading as we saw previously. So set your initial volume, record it in your table, because we said whenever there is a requirement for initial volume, you start by recording that. Before you do any titration, the first step you should do is recording the initial burette reading. So after setting your initial volume, please go ahead and record it in your table. Okay. By doing as above, we shall repeat the experiments and perform experiment 2 and even experiment 3. And after completing that, the practical is done. So now we are going to do this activity. We are going to record these values we have used as examples. We have used our initial volume as 24.50, 25.0 cubic centimeters, and our final volume as 49.00. So we are going to record those values in our table and we see how that table will look like. I'm going to give you some few seconds. Okay, I think that's enough. Now let us look at that table. You've made yours. Now mine is going to look like this. The rough is finished. Now we are on the second or the first experiment. the first experiment, our final B rate reading was 49.00. Our initial was 24.50. When you try to subtract the initial B rate volume from the final B rate volume, we shall get 24.5. So therefore, our table will have to look like this one here. Now, assuming we have done experiments 2 and 3, let us see how that table is going to look like, and we make some comments about it. Now, we have a table looking like that. When you look at that table, it has some common features. The first common feature here is the results have 2 decimal places. If you look at the rough, we have 24.50. When you look at the next one, we are having 0.00. The other one is 24.50. So when you look at those results in that column there, they are all having 2 decimal places. 0. There is the 0.50, there is the 0.00, and there is also 0.50. When you look at column 1 or experiment 1, we are having 0.00, we are having 0.50, and also 0.50. So which means our results there, they are having 2 decimal places. So it means our table in that concept, it is correct. Now let us look at the computations. The computations here, they are all subtractions. So which means to get our volume of solution used, we have just subtracted the initial burette volume from the final burette volume. For the rough, we are having 24.50. For the first experiment, we are having 24.50. For the second, we are having 24.60. For the third, we are having 24.70. So the subtractions here are correct. So we shall get marks for making correct computations or correct subtraction. Another thing to note here, when you look at our results on the volume of solution used, all of them, they look consistent. Why? Because they all have the smallest difference possible. For example, when you move from 24.50 to another 24.50, the difference is 0. So which means those two are very consistent. When you move on to 24.60, the difference is just 0.1. So 24.6 is also consistent. When you move on to 24.70, that value is also consistent. It has a difference from the first ones of 0.2 only. So which means such values are consistent. So also when you're carrying out your experiments or your practical, make sure your results are consistent. They should not go beyond 0.2. So if you have done that, you'll get marks. Then another thing here we should look at concerning the table, we should also be careful when you are titrating so that we get accurate results. So we get accurate results only when we have been careful. So that's all about that table. Make sure all the things we have discussed, you keep them in mind when you've come to this part of that table. Our next lesson, we are going to look at manipulation of results. In other words, we are going to look at how to deal with the results in the table of results and how to use them for calculations in the model concept. So we have covered everything to do with recording results. So next time we meet, we are going to be handling manipulation or dealing with the results. I want to thank you for attending my lessons and following my presentations. May the Lord bless you. We meet.